Hello and welcome to Saturday Morning Cartoons, the weekly podcast that revisits, reviews, and ridicules some of the world's weirdest animated series. Coming to you from way out of town, Oregon, I'll be your damn guide, Dave Crumbore. If you have any damn questions, you can ask them during the damn tour. Joining me, as always, my svelte-pelted co-host, Sean Paul Ellis. How's it going tonight, sir?
David. I'm doing well, buddy. How about yourself?
I'm doing real good. Can you guess the movie that my little damn puns were from?
Wasn't that from Vacation?
Yeah, it was from, I think, was
National
it Vegas
Lampoon's
Vacation?
I thought it was just Vacation.
I thought it was Vegas Vacation because it was when they were at the Hoover Dam.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
going to go Vegas Vacation. But yeah,
Okay.
definitely from the National Lampoon's Vacation series.
Yeah.
I have another quick question for you. Do you know if Airplane, was that a National Lampoon movie? Do you remember?
Airplane?
Yeah. There is an
my
airplane connection
gosh.
in tonight's episode, but this was not vetted before before we started the recording. I'm not sure if they were, but just like keep that level of humor in mind and some of the voices from Airplane as well, because there's a weird bunch of voice actors and guest stars that show up on this particular episode of this particular show that we watched tonight. And of course, how could you not know that I'm talking about Angry Beavers, the next of our New Year's Nicktoons? I don't know how you would have missed that one with all the damn puns and the airplane references. Yeah. Hey, for folks out there who don't know Angry Beavers, Sean, do you want to walk them through a little bit of the history?
I would love to.
Thank you.
The Angry Beavers is an American animated television series that was created by Mckay for Nickelodeon. The show premiered in the United States on April 19th, 1997. It ran for 4 seasons, totaling 63 episodes, and because, as we've talked about for a lot of these shows, they were split into segments, so there were 116 segments for this show, which is going to be interesting because tonight's episode, not broken into segments. One full 23-minute episode.
Yeah, it's kind of like we had last week with Hey Arnold. It was a bit of a departure. Now, the one we watched for Hey Arnold, I think, was actually like 2 episodes that were kind of all put together. It was almost like an hour-long special.
Right.
But itself was a departure from how Hey Arnold's plot, the episodic plots, normally played out. It all revolved around like Arnold's parents. And you can go back and listen to that episode if you missed it. But for this one of the Angry Beavers, it's also very different from what the rest of the show was kind of about, what the other, 62 episodes were like. So if you're not familiar with the show, the series revolves around Daggett and Norbert Beaver, 2 young Beaver brothers who have left their home to become bachelors in the forest near the fictional Way Out of Town, Oregon. That's pretty much all I need to know, yeah.
That's the name of the town is Way Out of Town.
Way Out of Town.
Like one word, Way Out of Town.
It's an old Native American name that they co-opted for Way Out of Town.
I wish that this show was a little bit more culturally sensitive. That's right out the gate.
Saturday Morning Cartoons or Angry Beavers?
Angry Beavers. I think we're very sensitive about a lot of issues that have come up on the show.
You and our guests are pretty sensitive. I look for an easy joke at any opportunity. So just lay that out there. This is, correct me if I'm wrong, but for me at least, where do you come into the Nicktoons at this point? So like everything that we've talked about so far, I think you and I have both watched a good amount of the episodes from this series, from all like, I don't know, I think it's about 7 or 8 that we've covered so far.
Right.
Once I got to Angry Beavers, that started to be the time where I was just like, you know what? Change the channel. Let's see what else is on. I don't know if it was just an age thing or just like the content of this show, but what was your memory of this show?
No, I fell within that range because 1997, I was, I was a little bit older and I was still watching cartoons a lot, but for some reason, Angry Beavers didn't resonate with me back in 97, 98 when I was watching it. And I'm going to venture to say that some of the Nicktoons that we are going to watch from here on out are shows that when they would come on, I would either slog through it to, in terms of waiting for what came on next,
right,
or I would just change the channel completely. And so some of these are very new to me. Some of these are gentle reminders of the fact that I made a good choice by changing the channel when I was a younger kid. So congratulations, younger me. You did it.
You did the right
and
thing.
You did not disappoint older Sean.
That's right.
I appreciate all of your efforts.
That's what it's all about. No, it's interesting that we're kind of getting into like the transition period. Like some of the ones that are coming up. Now we really only have this one and one more for this particular batch that we're doing. So the next one we won't have to come back to until next January. Which is fine, because when we get into those, it'll kind of be like new territory for us. Because I think with the exception of maybe one or two, I think there's one very, very famous one in that group. But then with the exception of maybe one other one, I really don't even know what's coming up, to be honest with you.
Right. And I'm very nervous for next week's, because it is definitely a show that when it would come on the air, I would just turn the television off.
Like not even get through the intro
Not
scene.
even. I had very little interest in next week's show.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Just different.
Make sure to come back for next week's show that we don't want to talk about.
When Sean's grumpy and bitching about shit, which is
you'll start to
how
pick up
the
the
show proceeds every
tonight.
week.
Yeah.
What? I'm sorry. You were saying just about
listeners, I think they'll start to pick up kind of like that we're getting into that transition now, because there's a lot of the things that are in this particular episode tonight that are references from earlier episodes in the series, but I had to go back and really look them up. Like there were certain things that I'm just like, what is this thing supposed to be? Or what is this word that they keep saying? Or what is this relationship supposed to be about?
Right.
And it wasn't, I couldn't pull it from my memory. I had to go back and actually do like a little bit more research into digging in, like, oh, okay, that's what this thing is, and that's where it came from. But we'll get into that in tonight's episode.
Right.
But before
I was gonna say, before we dig into that, I realized in '97
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of shit going on.
Yeah, it's like high school for you, probably, right?
I'm a little bit older, not by like leaps and bounds, but I realized in '97 I was probably applying for colleges.
Yeah, exactly. So probably not watching a whole lot of Angry Beavers.
So 17-year-old Sean was probably not watching a lot of Angry Beavers at this time. So I'm sorry, not sorry.
We were probably chasing other beavers at this point, to be honest with you, because the teen years, good times.
I like how you transitioned into that.
I did. I had to get that out of the way early.
I just feel like this whole title of this show, there were just so many moments where it just felt like it was somebody had a funny innuendo about an angry vagina, and they just didn't let that fucking joke go.
I think
it showed up.
Mitch Shower was probably a fan of what's the Primus song? Winona
had a big brown beaver.
Exactly. Yeah. Turns out it was a porcupine. So it might have been like an in-joke.
Just ruin the whole song.
I love that song so much. I love Primus. This show needs more slap bass. I'm just going to throw that out there right now. I don't know.
As opposed to all of its trumpets and horns that it has in it.
Yes. Oh, so Angry Beavers also needs more slap bass. I just meant our podcast needs just like somebody in the corner just playing licks on a slap bass. That'd be great. Or you can have an upright. You can do upright too.
Yeah, I really can't do a slap bass impression.
You can't do like
that's the close.
You can't be
that's
like
the close. That's the close.
Just
not
every time.
Not even gonna come close to trying to impersonate that.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the music of this episode, and really the only time it feels like it comes into, well, I take that back. One of the strongest times it comes into play is in the actual theme song. In this particular episode, there are a lot of moments where the music does kind of come to the forefront in a specific way, but the theme song is very different. And it's actually somewhat similar to what we had last week. Just for me, it wasn't quite as memorable because it was a different set of instruments. What was your take on the theme song?
I mean, it was fun. It kind of got me moving. I'm a sucker for horns.
Yeah. See, that's how I was with the saxophones. Like I'm the opposite. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for a brass band,
right,
and for a brass instrumental section. I listened to a lot of ska growing up, and a lot of punk music that would have ska in the back, or like have like a brass section in the background,
exactly.
like Goldfinger. And so, I loved those bands. I love that music, and so anytime it comes on, regardless of what medium, I kind of shake my shoulders a little bit. I kind of get a little bit into it.
Did you shake them for this show?
I shaked them a little bit for this show. I did a little shimmy shake, and so I was getting into it. It was good. It was fun, and there was some slapstick stuff.
Yeah.
That was in this of whenever they would present the title of the show, Angry Beavers, and having it fall on top of the two titular characters.
Right.
It just, some of it kind of prepared you for. I mean, I guess I just didn't remember from this show how much of this would have been very like slapstick physical comedy.
Yeah, I was not expecting quite as much.
I didn't either. And so there were moments.
Stuff. Yeah.
There were moments in this episode where things would happen, and my reaction was, "Oh, that person's clearly dead."
Yeah.
And then 3 seconds later, they're back, and I'm like,
"Well, now I think that might be poking a little bit of fun at the sort of the genre and the type of films that this episode is poking fun at. So that might be kind of like an in-joke there. I don't know how much that happens in all the other episodes, though. Probably fairly frequently, because it's a weird mix of like the hyper activity and the anxiety of like late 90s, but with like the old school classical slapstick vaudeville humor of like old Looney Tunes and the very cartoonish stuff. It was like this weird mashup of like all this kinetic energy, but then just a bunch of like really cartoonish, falls and explosions and stretching of the, body proportions and just like weird stuff like that. A lot of like physical torturous humor.
And I definitely, I get that.
Yeah.
And I think the addition to it was that at times I felt like the dynamic between the two brothers was very similar to that of Ren and Stimpy.
Except I can see that, but I don't
like. Yeah. We had one that was clearly in charge.
Yes.
And we had one that was clearly the follower or sort of portraying the role of the idiot.
Yes, very much so.
And I think the thing, as you were saying about the kinetic energy, I think the thing that was a telling point for me about Ren and Stimpy, about what made it so good, was that kinetic energy, that franticness, that manic power in that show would build to a frenzy, and then it would just be let out in a scream or a yell, or one of those moments where everything's frozen in the frame except for like Ren's head, and it's 5 times the proportions, and he's screaming with super teeth realistic that you've never seen before.
Yeah.
Not even those stills, but there were just those moments where like Ren would jump up and like it was the still background.
Oh, I thought you were going to say like where it was almost like that exploding background kind of thing, where it was like almost like an atom bomb goes off. Yeah.
It's like the exploding background, but like there were moments where like Ren, like a certain portion of his head or a certain area of his head would be animated and would be like flipping out. Yeah. And the thing that differed between these two shows is that it felt like Angry Beavers was maybe kind of working towards that, but just never achieved that full potential. Whereas Ren and Stimpy came in to that idea or that sensibility out of the gate without any, like, they knew who they were from the beginning. Right. And it felt like Angry Beavers was like, well, we got a show. Cool. Like,
let's have fun with it. Yeah.
Let's get some stuff out there. And I can respect that.
Yeah.
I think that they're both two very different things. I didn't, as you were mentioning with the energy and that kind of like late 90s anxiety, I got some of that from this show, but it kind of fell short of realizing its full potential.
Yeah, I like the way you kind of took that because it's almost like when Ren and Stimpy came in, they had that's how they created narrative or dramatic tension, right? So they had the idiot and then the person who's stuck with the idiot, and they're trying to get stuff done, and they're both frustrating each other. But the one who's not the idiot is the one that's eventually, he doesn't have that pressure release because he can't just let things go. So he eventually almost literally blows up from time to time. But in Ren and Stimpy, it takes 10, 12 minutes for them to get to that boiling point, and then things blow up in a spectacular fashion. And that makes the episodes, worth watching. With Angry Beavers, it's weird because, yes, you have that defined difference between the two characters. So you have Norbert, who is kind of the more refined, the more eloquent, the more intellectual of the two. And then you have Daggett, who's kind of the hyperactive and like this crazy one, wants to kind of run around all the time.
Just the derp.
Well, but there's that, but then there's times where they bleed over and they both fall into like these weird kind of pressure releases where they both either say the same word or the same phrase in a silly way, or they both kind of like, they fall into this weird idiot pit, right? So they're both being idiots at the time, and that releases all that tension and pressure, and then they just move on to the next manic thing. So that was like the manic energy of this thing. It was just like, you start to build stuff up, and then you diffuse it, and then you start to build stuff up, and you diffuse it, and you just move from the next to the next to the next. And it was a little crazy and a little jarring, and it just never had that same kind of power, that same kind of force that like a Ren and Stimpy would have. Yeah, that's a good description.
No, I agree. There were like the moments that I like the term idiot hole.
The idiot pit, yeah.
Yeah, idiot pit. I mean, I could definitely see why the idiot pit was so useful. I mean, these are children's cartoons, right. And I mean, let's be honest, Ren and Stimpy was not really for children, and so I can see how these are different, but sort of still trying to capture some of that same energy. Sure. With this, you needed they're brothers. they're brothers. And with Ren and Stimpy, you were never really quite sure of what the relationship was between it, whether it was sexual, whether it was platonic. And with this, like, that they're brothers, they're friends. And the thing that I found both frustrating and very interesting was their ability to fall into that idiot pit and sort of riff off one another. Because if you're friends and if you have siblings and if you have friends that you consider brothers, like that's what you do. You riff with them. You joke around in a fun manner, and if they say something dumb, you support that stupid thing that they say, and repeat it back to them, in a way that might be kind of stressing or communicating to them like, you are an idiot, but I'm going to say the dumb thing that you just said back to you.
It makes you laugh.
So you can hear, so you can actually hear how much of an idiot you're being, and that's what's fun and surprising. That I thought was a beautiful moment, but it was also for some reason like it irked me in a way that was really bizarre.
It was frustrating because it would basically be like if you said something, right? And then I was just standing over here like trying to be superior and just be like, man, that was a really stupid fucking thing that you just said. And then you would kind of like laugh and repeat it. And then I would just laugh and repeat it. And then it would just be like, okay, so what have we accomplished? Because at that point, it's like we've acknowledged that it was a stupid thing to say. And then we both kind of laughed about it. And I see what you're saying, where it's kind of a nice thing that they squash that tension and then they never really like fight. They always cooperate.
Right.
But they always have this kind of like underlying tension between them because they're not operating on the on the same level. So it was just weird. It was hard to kind of get into a flow. And because it's so manic, they just jump from one situation or one joke to the next. And it's just, I think I wrote something down. It was like a weird combination of like a freakazoid, because it was kind of around that same time. And
yeah, it was.
And like a more classic, almost like a Scooby-Doo caper, at least this particular episode. All right, so it's kind of like a Scooby-Doo caper with some of the slapsticky stuff, and then like the freakazoid levels of mania. So it was weird. There were times where I really enjoyed it, and there were times where I was just like, all right, let's just pick it up and get to the next thing here.
Yeah.
You wanna dig into this episode a little bit?
Let's dig into
this. So what did we watch here tonight, buddy?
We watched, this is season 2, episode 10, The Day the Earth Got Really Screwed Up. And the synopsis for this is, the Beavers trick or treat the scary house on the hill. It turns out to be the home of their B-movie star hero, Oxnard Montalvo.
Oxnard Montalvo.
Exvard Montalvo.
So if that annoyed you, don't watch this episode, because they do it about 50 times. Jeez. And this is one of those idiot pits where they say the name and they kind of like just turn into these like drooling idiots of just, they say this name over and over again with like reverence, but also kind of idiocy at the same time.
And I mean, so I can't say that I haven't done that before. There,
oh sure,
a lot, even when I will teach or coach improv, there's a classic game where you pick like a very simple line and you say it over and over and over again, but each time it's with different intonation, and it's to kind of volley between some of those different emotions. It's just very hard because in this setting, like what I'm describing and talking about is an exercise for actors in order to get them to better emote.
Right.
What we're talking about in terms of this show is a quick bit that when you're done with it and when it resolves, and there is no resolution. Yes. So let me just say, when the bit ends,
yeah, that's a big difference.
You again think to yourself exactly what you mentioned earlier, Dave, is where did that take us? Like, where do we go from that point forward?
And that's the thing. It's just that's the vaudevillian feel of it, because it's just a bunch of staged bits or staged jokes that they have a finite ending to it. So it's like it starts, here's the punchline, and it ends, and then we move to the next one. Sometimes without very non sequitur kind of moving from one thing to the other. Just as a quick aside, did you happen to see the newest Hail Caesar trailer that the Coen brothers released?
I have not.
Okay,
no.
not to go too far diverted on this, but it's basically Ralph Fiennes is talking to Alden Ehrenreich. So Ralph Fiennes is a director. Alden Ehrenreich is he's like got a southern twang, but he's supposed to be kind of like this refined gentleman in the movie that he's shooting.
Oh, boy.
But he's trying to say the line, "Would that it were so simple." So Ralph Fiennes comes over to him and he just says, "Say it exactly like I'm saying it. Would that it were so simple." And Alden keeps going, "Would that it were so simple." And anyway, this goes on for like 2 minutes. So it sounds funny in theory, and all my coworkers and stuff thought it was hilarious because they just keep going back and forth, like you were saying with the improv lesson
exercise,
right?
yeah.
But I just found it very, very irritating at a certain point because it was just one of those things that's just repeated in your head and it just starts to drive you crazy. And that's how some of the stuff was in this episode tonight, because they would just gravitate and grab onto these like weird little catchphrases or words and the way that they said them. And you could tell that the voice actors were having a good time with it because they just said them over and over and over again. And it was driving me a little crazy. We'll try not to do that too much tonight. That aside, I really like how this opened up. And I think that it probably, to describe it and explain it, we probably need a little bit of background on this particular series, right? So Angry Beavers, they're beloved. I mean, I went through the reviews and I really didn't find any that people didn't like it. Everybody really seems to love the show. One of the things that they love the most about it is the Beavers' love for B movies. So they really like watching the old kind of like classic bad B horror and sci-fi movies. That's one of their main things.
I can relate.
Yeah, and I think everybody can. And that was kind of the cool thing about this particular episode, is that it is a Halloween episode from, I think it was 97 or 98, that focused on one of those B movies. It actually put the Beavers in their own B movie. That was kind of a cool meta thing. And they even accomplished that through a really cool difference in animation style. There's one that's very, realistic for a cartoon, and it looks almost like the old Johnny Quest or the old even like Adventure Brothers, which are kind of cast in the same mold anyway, but the heavy kind of outlines, the strong jaws, the muscular physiques, and the very realistic looking human characters. And then you've got these goofy little wild looking crazy beaver creatures at the same time. So it's kind of a cool dichotomy of the animation styles that I like between the two. That aside, that's kind of the only thing that I like from this, other than some of the humor that was within the show. But what was your reaction to kind of just the style of the show when this thing first opened up?
Yeah, I mean that old, well, first that Hanna-Barbera kind of like darker lines with sort of the dark lines to accentuate specific features within their face and lines and contours. I love that. Like I think that, as you mentioned, Johnny Quest is probably one of the prime examples of that. Venture Brothers does a great job of emulating that style and paying homage to it. And so it's a blast to see. I liked the opening for the reasons that we've mentioned, is that it opens very much like it's sort of maybe a Twilight Zone meets the opening of Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Oh man, that's great.
Slash The Blob.
Yeah.
It's
like
always that quintessential
feature.
Always that quintessential thing flying through the cosmos, and then it just crash lands in a forest somewhere, and you're like, oh, I hope nobody goes to find that. Oh, they're going to find. Damn it, they're gonna die.
Yeah. And then with the narration by Peter Graves as well too. That's where our airplane connection comes in tonight. We'll get back to him in a little bit, but yeah.
And so we really had this idea of this object from another dimension, and it states the intent right off the gate. And so that's what I find interesting about this episode. And also some some of these like cult classic horror films, it's this like object from another dimension that feeds on the fabric of space or time and space, and you're like, cool.
Yeah,
like that sounds like a badass
totally
villain.
I thought it was very cool. It was not what I expected for a show called Angry Beavers. I was not expecting the opening to like a cool kind of throwback to these B movies. But that was really cool. And then the next thing, we see some guy kind of like lean over a railing on this like Malibu-like home. It actually kind of looked like the compound from Johnny Quest too.
A little bit.
So he kind of looks over it, and like Sean says, somebody's got to find this thing. And whoever's the first person to find it is probably in for a world of hurt.
You fucked.
He's fucked. So he stares at this thing, and it's a cool animation. These like two green laser beams launch out of this fallen object and just like hit him in the eyes. He drops like a sack of potatoes. And then when he comes back up, he's like this weird kind of Jekyll and Hyde type monster with glowing green eyes himself. And he says, "Yes, master." And that is when they cut to the title sequence for not only the movie, but the episode as well.
Well, let's before we get into this, let's explain who this person who gets zapped with this green light is. Okay. This guy.
You don't know this at this point. Yeah.
You don't know this, but this, and this was a fun point that I thought of as I was rewatching the episode again tonight.
Okay.
This character is Oxnard Montalvo's. It's his manservant.
Right. So his
who
butler.
comically, is always referred to as a manservant.
Oh, why is that, Sean?
And because his name is Man Servant.
Oh, I get it now.
Yeah, do you?
They have a lot of fun with these names. So
get that low-hanging fruit. So it was very funny that he finds this. So he's already, put this in perspective, manservant, the manservant for Oxford Montalvo, is already a servant to Oxnard Montalvo.
Montalvo.
And now he just became a servant to this glowing thing in the ground.
Yes,
this
master.
man in every situation is still a servant with a different master. And I was like, man, you got to diversify what you do, buddy. Maybe take some time off and really find yourself.
He was trying
through Italy.
He was probably about to pack his bags and leave, and this
right.
alien shut up and messed his plans up.
Sucked into this bullshit.
So since we took a little diversion here for that, I just want to kind of mention some of these other names that we'll get into here in a second as well, and also the people that voiced them. So manservant / manservant, voiced by Jonathan Hayes, who's a Pittsburgher, and he's known for doing a lot of different B movies. I think he was born in like 1928, and I think he's still going, to be honest with you.
Oh, good guy.
So, and then some of the other names we have. So we've got Norbert and Daggett, and those are the two Beavers, and they're obviously there for the whole series. So for Norbert, we've got Nick Mckay. He was actually probably most well known for voicing Salem the cat on Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
Yeah.
So he's the voice of Salem. You've got Daggett, who's voiced by Richard Horvitz. The biggest one I found was the voice of Billy and Billy's dad on Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy.
Oh, okay.
And then our guest voices for tonight. So Oxnard Montalvo. It's Tom Kane. He does a lot of different voices, like just a ton of roles over the years.
This guy's in like everything.
Probably most notable for Yoda in some of the more recent Star Wars cartoons. But obviously that's like a very different kind of a voice.
Sure.
This might be my favorite name other than Manservant. Toluca Lake.
Toluca Lake.
So Toluca Lake is a neighborhood in Los Angeles.
Oh, it is?
So yeah, it's like an affluent LA neighborhood.
Oh, okay.
Toluca Lake. So they named this chick the female lead Toluca Lake, who's absolutely hysterical in the show. She's voiced by Adrienne Barbeau, known for General Hospital, Maude, and then movies like The Fog, Creepshow, Escape from New York. So
nice.
they're kind of casting people that I'm assuming the creators were like, who did I love in these old kind of classic B movies? I'm not calling Fog or Escape from New York B movies, but I mean, these kind of genre movies. And
we're going to call them cinematic masterpieces.
Cinematic masterpieces. You've also got Dr. Kawatiki, which I didn't even catch his name, to be honest with you.
I didn't catch his name either.
Nah, he's played by a fellow named William Shallert, who's also still going. He was known for a role in the Patty Duke show. That'll take you back. And then we've got two more. So we've got the narrator / General Warning, who's another fun character that comes up.
So good.
That's Peter Graves. So from Mission Impossible fame from the series.
Yeah.
And also Airplane. Great role in Airplane. So that's the Airplane connection. And then the alien object was actually voiced by John Biner, who does just a ton of animated roles as well. So
I'm going to say John Biner's voice in this at the very end sounded a lot like Mojo Jojo for me. Enough that I had to actually, that I noted it.
Just to make sure it
especially during the very end kind of wordplay pun bit.
Yes.
Not pun bit, but just the wordplay bit.
Yes.
That they did at the end with him not being able to hear what was going on as the alien.
Yeah.
It just, like, what is going on up there?
It does sound like a little bit.
I am Mojo Jojo. It made me laugh a little bit.
Yeah, the voice acting
because I remembered another cartoon. This show made me laugh because I remembered another cartoon.
You were thinking of another cartoon. But no, the voice acting work is great. And I think that they really nailed it with the guest stars in this one, because the characters that they bring in are, because of the way that this alien has kind of interacted with time and reality, not time so much, but reality, these B movie actors are kind of pulled from the screen and are now kind of come to life they're acting out their own movie within this TV episode. Right. So it's kind of this weird meta thing where they're acting out like if you took all their horror and sci-fi movies together, took all the creatures and all the plots and all the crazy shit that happened, you put it in one movie, that's what's happening in this particular episode. So that's kind of a cool premise. And then who is the biggest fan of Oxnard Montalvo?
We have Norb and Dag.
Yeah.
Are the right before we get splashed on the screen with an Angry Beavers film.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. It looked like a Quentin Tarantino like roadshow production.
Oh, really? Because that's exactly the title credits that I expect to see right before I watch a porno.
Okay, or that. For a 70s porn.
70s porno, vintage
like
porno.
the boom mic that just drops in for no reason.
Just gotta watch it on VHS, man. It's just got it's got a lot
Beta's
more soul.
better. Beta's higher quality.
Beta's
so we meet
cool.
Norbert and Daggett. It's Halloween. It's Halloween, but it's actually the night before Halloween. So for some reason,
which I will say, no, it makes sense now.
Okay, walk me through it.
Melanie Parker, fan of the show, pointed out to me that Halloween, the night before Halloween, is Mischief Night. So that's the night that like people are supposed to go outside and throw eggs and vandalize shit.
Let me ask you a question. Did you ever Tic Tac?
Did I ever Tic Tac?
Did you ever Tic Tac?
What's that? What's Tic Tac?
Nobody knows what Tic Tac is. It must be like a regional thing for me.
I mean, maybe I did it, but I don't know. I've never heard it called Tic Tac.
It's when we used to get. So I had cornfields not too far. You would go get like the ears of corn with dried kernels on them, or just get a bunch of like just dried corn, and then you just go around and just like throw pieces of it at people's windows until they would come out and like open the door or open the window and just be like, "What the hell's going on?" And you just run and hide. And you just keep coming back and doing that and just screwing with people all night. So that was tic-tacking because it makes like a little ticky-tack sound on the glass.
All right.
That's what we used to do. We didn't. I never did the TPing, definitely not the egging or anything like that because we had our place. My dad's place was TP'd and egged a couple times, and that was not fun because I had to clean it up for some reason.
Ooh. Yeah. We definitely did a lot of TPing, a lot of egging, and a lot of shaving cream.
No, never did that. Just the tic-tac, just a shitload of dried corn everywhere.
Wow.
It was a weird time growing up in the 50s. We had that government corn coming in.
Much more a wholesome period of time for young Dave Trumbore.
And we scooped that all up and cooked it for breakfast. So it was all good. So yeah, but I mean, that makes sense that they're out for like Mischief Night, but these idiots are dressed in Halloween costumes and they're trying to trick or treat.
Right.
Like they're trying to get candy. Ugh. That's one of those idiot pits that they fall into. They just say, Norbert can be like on his high horse, and then as soon as Daggett says candy, both of them will just like devolve into like weirdos. Just start saying candy over and over again.
Did you just say candy?
Candy.
That's how it happens in the show.
It's not good. So they're out trick-or-treating. So Norbert's dressed like Oxnard Montalvo, which is pretty funny. He's got like this crazy pointed nose as like his beaver face, but then on the front, like the very tip of his nose, he's got what almost looks like a Ronald Reagan mask. That's like his costume, right? And then, okay, what do you think Daggett was dressed as?
Just look like a toe. Like a toe with like a piece of chewing gum behind him.
So he looks like a big toe with just like this weird gray sack behind him. So at first I wrote down like, is he a toe? What is it? Why is he a toe? And then Norbert calls him a spleen. And then later on you find that he's actually what's known as the crawling spleen. So yes, he's a giant toe with a spleen attached to it. That's actually a reference from another one of the B movies that was referenced in an earlier episode of Angry Beavers. So there is a B movie that they go and see called The Crawling Spleen.
So there's some continuity in this.
Yeah, exactly. So silly stuff like that just didn't really make any sense. You kind of had to go back and have watched the earlier episode. So it looks weird. It is weird. It's from an earlier part of the episode. So yeah. So they're out trick-or-treating, which eventually leads them to, because they're not finding any candy, because nobody has candy. It's the night before Halloween, not Halloween night. So they're not getting candy from anybody until they ate. What do they say? Like Daggett says, just, one more house. We'll do one more, and if we don't get any candy, then we'll just call it a night and we'll go home.
Well, before this, we should mention that, Daggett actually makes the comment, he goes, "This is so stupid." And I'm just like, this might sum up my experience with this show.
Yeah, that's a good quote there, Daggett.
So he, they say that they want to go to this final house, this final house that's on the corner.
It's the last house on the left. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So they so they go down and unbeknownst to them, it is the home of B actor, movie star, Oxnard Montalvo. Now, I want to ask a quick question.
Shoot.
What kind of bank do you think a B movie actor is bringing in that would afford him a palatial mansion overlooking the side of a cliff.
He must have had some good, like auto deals or a few car dealerships in the area or something. Because he had a
franchise that shit up.
He franchised it, man.
Damn.
And he had so once you get into his place too, which we'll get to in a second, but he has like all these statues and stuff from his movie career, and I thought that was actually kind of a cool touch.
I love that as well. That was actually super fun.
He's very successful. Maybe he made his, cut his teeth in the B movies, and then maybe he was like a Christopher Lee.
Could be.
He did a lot of the B movies, horror movies, and then actually became like prestigious and well known.
Yeah. Do we want to jump into the house?
Yeah. Nothing really happens outside. They just kind of like fawn over the place for a few minutes, and then they make their way inside. About it, and they're creeping around. They don't like, as far as I know, they don't knock. They don't ring a bell.
No,
they just bust into the house.
That's what was so weird. Yeah. Like, this whole idea of getting candy the night before quickly escalates into a breaking and entering.
Yeah,
like,
B&E.
This turns into a B&E immediately.
Immediately B&E.
Without any question whatsoever.
Into, like, their most, like, beloved actor's house. And they want to get his autograph and candy. Like, they're still they're very all about getting the candy.
So, as Dave mentioned, they have this really cool shot where they show the interior of Oxnard's house. And in the inside, he's got all of these... I'm assuming props.
Yeah, they're like life-size
replicas.
Statues and replicas. Yeah,
right. Of these horror movie creatures that I'm sure Oxnard has battled in the movies that he's presumably been in, and so these things are huge and they're fun and they resemble stuff like Swamp Thing, but I think in this case they call him the slime beast from the Evil of Darkpool.
Nice. They had great names, great titles.
Yeah. So they have all these like crazy names. And they're fun as shit to see these things. And some of them are just hideously creepy.
Yeah.
And fucking bizarre.
Well, especially because they're walking through this house like when it's like pitch black. Like you can only kind of see the shapes of these things and some of the outlines and stuff. And there's like a little kind of like blue filtered light. And yeah, they're creepy. Like they're not meant to be kid friendly. They're monsters. They're straight up monsters. Like even to the point where they look at the ceiling and there's like a flying beast dragon kind of thing. He looks kind of like Zoc from Herculoids, but it's this like monstrous dragon thing. And then there was one. Did you catch the one about the claws of the golem? They had like this throwaway line. At least to me, it was throwaway, where they were like, they say something about like, it's the one that they never saw, right?
Correct.
He's like, this is the one movie we've never seen, and he says something like they must have had a hard time getting that made, or some. They have some weird quip in there that made no sense to me. I don't know if it was like an in joke or a reference. I don't know. I didn't pick that one up.
It was sort of, they recognized the movie, but they had never seen it, and their comment could have been akin to, and moving along.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty much all it was.
That was just it.
It was just like filling dead air. I don't know what the heck was happening there. But it was cool to see that, but then they instantly like, so what happens to these things? Normally in like a Scooby-Doo movie or whatever, you'll like follow the characters through, and then the camera will kind of linger back, and then you'll see one of the monster things like move or like blink its eyes or something like that. They don't even
or the face in the painting kind of like shuffles ever so slightly
and looks at him. Yeah, same kind of thing, except they didn't even bother separating the characters. Just like all these monsters' eyes just like immediately turn green, and everything starts coming to life.
And it's confusing because at first you think that these monsters are coming to life simply based on proximity.
Right.
That Norbert and Daggett are walking through, and as they're passing each one of these monsters, seconds after they pass, it immediately gets glowing eyes. You know, the giant dragon, they say, "Oh, it looks like it could come to life and fly right out of here." And 30 seconds later, it's exactly what it does.
Yeah.
Not even 30 seconds later. I'm sorry, like
3 seconds.
3 seconds later, it like breaks up through the glass, and you're like, how the fuck are they not hearing all this shit?
Yeah.
But
still in their costumes at this point too. Still in their costumes, carrying their little candy bags. So all these things are coming to life. They're all getting animated, and they're kind of just like stomping around. And it's weird because they're not really chasing them yet, but they kind of are. But then some of them are just like flying off into the distance and doing their own thing. It was just odd. There was I didn't catch like a real good connection there. Not until Man Servant comes out anyway.
Correct. And so we get a telepathic message from the glowing green alien that's outside.
Yes.
That says, "Never have I felt such feelings of reality." And he evidently needs to have these two beavers.
He feeds on it.
And this is the point where you sort of realize, and they kind of pull this out of Oxnard later.
Yes.
in a very in a slightly comical bit that I did enjoy, where they where the imagination of Norbert and Daggett is what is fueling the creation of these monsters. And so, as we mentioned, all of these creatures to this point that they've walked past and they've mentioned and they've called out and they said we remember them, they've all immediately come to life. But then this golem, they have no recollection of it, so they have no base, and so it doesn't come to life. Exactly. It actually just remains a statue.
Exactly. And this is all thanks to kind of like the alien thing that's outside. His power allows for weird things to happen in reality, but it's actually Norbert and Daggett's imagination that, like Sean said, brings these guys to life, except for the one they've never seen. So everything's come to life, and then the beavers are kind of like, they're like, there's nobody here. Where are we going to get our damn candy? And then Man Servant shows up and just kind of like, for whatever reason, so the alien tells Man Servant that he wants, like Sean said, he wants these beavers. So Man Servant tries to like hit him with his eye beams, but the beavers are busy trying to like change out of their goofy Halloween costumes because they keep getting in the way, and they're like looking for their candy bags, and they lost their candy bags. So they're just doing this little slapstick routine that goes on for way too long, where they just kind of spin around in circles and they keep avoiding the eye beams from Man Servant until the point where they basically like, I think they hit him in the crotch, don't they?
No, they hit him right in the nuts.
Right in the nuts. And then knock him down the stairs.
Knock him downstairs. And this is the first time where I was like, that human is now officially dead.
He's dead.
They killed. Yep. This was candy, breaking and entering, homicide.
Murder. Yep. This actually appeared on an episode of Law & Order Special Viewing Unit. So you can check that out. The candy homicides. So you think like Manservant's down for the count. And the beavers kind of think that way too, because then they just like walk past him, no big deal. But then they figure out that they've lost all their candy, and they go looking for it, and then they overhear something's happening in the other room, and it gets their attention.
So Oxnard, Toluca Lake, and Professor are sitting there, and they're looking over like a monitor, presumably like a computer monitor, trying to figure something out. And where Oxnard says, "Oh, this little gem," he says, "with a little luck and things going in our favor." I just that moment, I just kind of like folded my head.
But I honestly love pretty much everything that comes out of the mouths of these three characters, because it is just straight up, a satire of the bad dialogue from these B movies,
right?
Or just of the plots themselves. So we'll get into these little bits as they go on. But I actually, that was one of the like very funny things that I thought was in this episode, and it made all the like the beaver hijinks aside, it made the episode palatable for me. Otherwise, I would have just been irritated the whole time.
There was a good amount more of weird beaver assertions that come on, to the point where everybody that's in the room, Professor, Toluca Lake, and Oxnard, don't really understand that these are beavers.
No, and I don't blame them, because they just look like strange rat creatures.
They continue to call them pointy creatures.
Yes, because that's what they are.
And so Norbert says, we are all beef beavers. Yeah. And I was like, oh boy.
He's supposed to be the smart one.
Yeah. And it's just, I don't know if these little bits were put in there as like a way that like if you were older and you got sort of maybe the innuendo that it was there, but it just, they were things that just kind of just fell out of place.
Yeah, they were just odd.
I'm also really just concerned that people don't understand and know what a beaver looks like. That is kind of concerning to me. That this guy is a professor, and these people seem like they're relatively well-traveled and may have spent some time with wildlife, and yet nobody seems to be able to figure out what the fuck a beaver looks like.
Well, I think it's kind of funny though too, because it was the different animation styles. So it was kind of like the realistic animation versus the very cartoonish animation. So for me, I was okay with that, because it was just like a divide.
Well, then how come the beavers didn't look at the humans and they were just like, "Ooh, you guys are weird looking humans"?
Because it's Oxnard Montalvo.
I mean, I guess
they know these guys from Silver Screen.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, I don't know. Whatever. I'm not going to defend them too much. But then at this point, so meanwhile, while the beavers are hanging out with the humans are trying to figure out what the hell these pointy things are. Man Servant is animating the golem back in the other room. The golem now goes on a rampage and basically just like crashes through the wall. This was one of my few laugh out loud moments, because at this point they like cut to a scene, like they just hear this like stomping and the whole house is shaking and they're just like, what's going on? And then the golem just like crashes through a wall, but it doesn't really go anywhere because he's stuck kind of like with the door and the piece of the wall like under his, like between his arms. And then the beavers are right in front of him, but Daggett is freaking out, losing his mind, just like screaming and caterwauling and like stretching all over the place. And then Oxnard Montalvo points at him and he's like, look out, that little fellow's gone berserk. Which that was a laugh out loud moment for me. And then it cuts to a scene where the golem is actually stepping on Daggett's tail. That's why he's freaking out so much. That was kind of fun.
So then Daggett goes berserk.
Yeah.
And ends up gnawing at the stone that this golem is made out of and destroys him. And so everybody's praising him. Right. So everybody's praising him for his bravery in this moment and having defeated this come to life statue.
Right. At this point, this is where you get one of a few screams, great B-movie screams from Toluca Lake. Because anytime she's kind of in danger, she just screams, and it's fantastic.
And you also get the moments where they show Oxnard doing the thinking face.
Oh, yes.
Which is the hand on the chin with the finger kind of like up near his nose, and he's kind of like, You know, very like Steve Jobs, like thinking-esque, except his was down more towards the
he had
the chin.
He had the knuckle on the chin.
Yeah. But just kind of like that thinking face the entire time. Like there are a large number of those moments in this episode.
But they're great.
It's ridiculous.
They're great. They actually set up fairly well. The editing's well done. The writing's well done. The moments that Oxnard has to be a hero, and then he kind of gets his ass handed to him the very next moment or just screws something up because he's not really in a movie at this point. So it's not like scripted for him to actually succeed. So they're kind of funny. But in the meantime, while all this is going on, the alien is outside feeding on reality, but he's getting kind of impatient. And he's been feeding on the imagination so much that he can now take the form of like this massive cybernetic spider. So he starts to kind of like get up out of his hovel and he starts to kind of move around outside. And as he does, this kind of wave of black and white just washes over the entire landscape. So everything, all color is blotted out except for the beavers themselves and then the creature's green glowing eyes. So any creature that is animated has these green glowing eyes and the beavers are still in color, but everybody else is black and white. So we are now fully in black and white B-movie action mode.
Right.
That's your scene.
Except for, of course, Norbert and Daggett, who are still in
cartoons.
Full color.
Yeah, exactly. But this is where it leads into like this just crazy run of just slapstick gags and kind of nonsense.
We have a lot of weird comedy bits, and everything from the professor saying, "I've got a short film that I put together that I'd like to show you."
Oh, he tries to show that film strip about 10 times, and something always happens.
To the point where we get the bit where somebody will say something, and then somebody will repeat it again immediately.
Yeah.
We have the alien outside who says, "I'm becoming larger and stronger," and we have the woman on the inside with the worst Boston accent I've ever heard. Just goes, "He's becoming larger and stronger." I was like, "What the fuck?"
It sounded like Marissa Tomei from My Cousin Vinny.
These two youths. It's ridiculous.
But there's just these like Sean was saying, there's these other funny moments. Like Oxnard tells Toluca to run for it, and she runs, and you hear this like Foley sound in the background, and it turns, and she has run like smash face first into a wall, and she's kind of got the cartoonish like arms and legs spread out, and like cracks in the wall. Like there's that. There's the doctor who's like the professor's like testing something with an electrical probe, and it's not working, so he puts it in his mouth for whatever reason. It like electrocutes him to the point that he looks like he's pretty well dead.
And that was because I wrote that down as a note because the sound effects that accompany him electrocuting himself and then falling onto the ground, falling below where his lab station is the sound that I would associate in most cartoons with like crumpled bones falling to the ground and like hitting the floor. That's what he sounded like.
So if you remember back to the Ewoks, Star Wars Ewoks episode, it is either the sound of crumpling bones or Ewok farts. One of those two things.
Definitely.
So that happens. The funny thing is, after all this stuff happens, like Oxnard, goes to like fight a monster and he just gets completely pummeled. His face comes back and it's all bruised and bloodied. They're always fine. Like Toluca breaks her ankle or twists her ankle 4 separate times.
That was a funny bit.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed that because as Toluca Lake is running out of the house with Norbert and Daggett, she trips and is just like, oh, my ankle. And so they run back and they pick her up. And this entire time you see the crawling spleen, like just towing its way slowly like an inchworm across the fucking floor in a non-menacing fashion.
No, just very slowly. Slime trail.
But they're freaked out.
Yeah.
They're freaked out. So she then gets back up, starts running, takes like 2 more steps and falls and is just like, my other ankle. And you could see them visibly getting annoyed.
Very frustrated.
And vocally getting annoyed and frustrated. To the point where she gets up and I just go, if she doesn't fall and fuck up both of her ankles, I was like, I'm turning this episode on.
I'm glad you called it because I thought they were done.
2 seconds later. Well, I mean, rule of 3 in comedy.
Yeah, I was just waiting for like some resolution later. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just hoping that they were going to hit that because it was a fun, silly beat that is synonymous with B horror movie culture, and so I wanted that to happen so bad, and they even bring it back at the end.
Yes,
which
they do, which was great.
One of my favorite parts. So they have this whole Toluca Lake ankle bit, which is fun.
And then she gets the crap beat out of her too, because like Oxnard goes to throw a bookcase at a monster, and instead he hits Toluca and just smashes her into the stairs. He tries to catch her from a lobby above, and he misses, and she just smashes into the ground. But she's fine.
You're just like, she's dead. Like
she should have been dead 100 times, but she's fine. She's fine.
Yeah.
And then we get to, so that's kind of like the slapstick run, and then we get to some more weird stuff. So like the professor has been working on this machine that you'd never hear about until this point, called the Mindulator. Yeah. And he needs
Great
Oxnard.
name for machine though.
Yeah, Mindulator.
All in all.
I'll mind you later. So
Mindulator.
He tells Oxnard, he's like, hit that alien monster with the Mindulator. And Oxnard does. Go ahead.
No, I think that this is, I just want to be very clear about what you said, because the word choice in this is beautiful. It makes
did you write it down?
Wow. Oh, no, just with the fact that he says, hit him with the Mindulator.
Yes.
And he throws him this, what looks like a ray gun.
Yeah, it's 100% a ray gun. It's got like a radar dish. It's got a pointy thing. It's got a trigger. It's got a switch. It's 100% a gun. And then he says, Oxnard, hit him with the Mindulator. So Oxnard flips the switch and then just chucks it at the monster and just hits him with it. Like physically just hits him with it. And then the professor's like, great, he knows how to use it. So, I mean, that was kind of funny. That's how it meant to be used. And then, so he's like, that's how it's meant to be used. And then Doc's like, I'll explain how that would have worked in my film strip. And then the alien just bursts through again, like tentacles just waving everywhere, just completely destroying this house. So now the house is in the process of falling apart, falling down, and the beavers are outside, and the humans are stuck inside trying to escape.
So if you're paying attention, this creature morphed from a spider now into a tentacle creature,
massive,
into some type of a massive squid creature, with no rationale whatsoever. But that's fine. Like that's fine. We get, as you mentioned, we get another reference, so we get a second beat for the I'd like to show you this film strip thing that we is interrupted right away, and then this is sort of where at this point this is kind of where we have Manservant is reintroduced at this point to the group, to Oxnard, to Toluca the Professor, and the Beavers, and this is sort of where the episode went off the rails a little bit
for a number of reasons.
me.
Yeah.
One is that it seemed like the episode sort of gave up on itself at this point because, I mean, I don't know if this was just this obviously was a very specific choice that the writers exercised, but suddenly, because of these names and because of how the pronunciation for everything is, Oxnard suddenly can't say the name of his manservant that has been serving under him for X number of years, presumably. He can't do this. Dag sort of breaks at this point and just says, quote, "This is the stupidest thing that I've ever seen."
Well.
To which in my note, I just went, "Yup."
Yeah, agreed.
And then, and then as these things are occurring, suddenly we get a flash over to a general.
Oh my God. So this, I liked and hated at the same time because it was such like a non sequitur, but because this was Peter Graves,
I enjoyed. Yeah. I'll agree with you. I enjoyed this for the fact that if Peter Graves And I enjoy the fact because it is a non sequitur,
Mm-hmm.
and because it is one of those things that in like all B horror films, somebody's like, we need to mobilize the
Yeah,
army,
exactly.
and we need to get them here now. And I love that thing. The part that pissed me off,
Yeah.
and that made no fucking sense to me, is that suddenly this goes into a series of live action bits
This
of
montage.
old stock footage
Yeah.
from presumably the 40s and 50s.
Yeah, and then so it starts off with like, pilots getting ready to jump in their planes and their bombers, and then the bombers taking off, and then guys in tanks rolling over the hills, and then cavalry, and then sumo wrestlers, and then baby sea turtles crawling into the ocean. So it was just kind of this just crazy manic mashup of weird footage.
And I get the idea that like they're trying to say we're throwing everything, including the kitchen sink
and the sea
at
turtles.
this monster
in
the sea turtles. I'm sorry, I just didn't find it funny.
It was just weird. Like watching it, I was just like, it was more like clinical for me. I was just noting like, okay, there's sumo wrestlers and sea turtles. Okay, good, we got it. Like that was it. I didn't laugh. I was just like, oh, okay, I got all these notes taken down. I think it was just supposed to show like, so we're in the beaver's imagination, right?
Sure.
So they're like calling back all these different movies and stuff that they've seen before, and it's just like this homage to all these military movies where they show up and then there's just like random documentary and nature footage that shows up, and like, I don't know, it's just odd. The whole thing starts to unravel at this point, basically.
Yeah, there's the moment at the very end where the general says, general warning is like, hit him with everything you got, and it's got women who are kind of in a, like they're laying on their backs, their legs up in the air.
Yeah, like a weird slingshot. And they've got what looks
like a slingshot.
I don't know what that was
between
about.
their feet and their hands, and they're pulling it, like it's anchored to their foot, but they're pulling it taut with their hands, and then like one by one, in sort of like this, like synchronized swimming, like cascade. They just all let go,
no
and
clue.
You're just like, what the? And then there's random people,
just tribal people
like
dancing,
like tribal indigenous people who are cheering, and like it is.
It's just off the rails. Yeah. Because you've got, so they've got like live action footage of dogfights, aerial combat with this like dragon thing,
actual dog fight, actual dogs,
not actual dog fights. Because I didn't want to confuse people and just be like,
God.
And then they showed just actual dogs in a pit fighting to the death. That the show didn't quite go that far. So aerial dog fighting, and then the dragon thing shows up like in the sky too. So now they've got this weird crossover of like the animated dragon flying across the live action footage and getting shot at.
Right.
Now, at this whole time, the humans are inside. Every time Oxnard tries to like move some stuff out of the way so that they can clear a path, somebody behind him gets like clonked in the head with debris falling from the ceiling. Meanwhile, the beavers are outside fighting like literally every monster that's come to life. They're just like running around, diving behind stuff, plonking things on the head, and just like, it's just chaos. Absolute
hitting
chaos.
them with the mindulator.
With the mindulator, just smashing into everything.
Just hitting them with the mindulator.
Until at one point they decide they should probably, use it to defeat this giant thing that's the source of all their problems, right?
Right.
This is when probably the most cartoonish thing happens as far as the beavers are concerned.
And and now having said about the slingshot portion of the live action, this suddenly makes a little bit more sense in retrospect.
Yeah.
Slightly more.
I don't know how elastic beavers are though.
Yeah, they're not at all. You'll just tear them apart.
Oh God.
You'll rip them apart Mortal Kombat style.
Ugh, all beef.
Finish it. And so they get to this point where the brothers seemingly have this unspoken language where they look at each other and they kind of like, yeah, that's the thing that we're gonna do.
Yep.
And I respect that.
I
like that.
Beaver slingshot.
And so Dag holds on to one of the tentacles, and Norbert stretches him out and puts the mindulator on his tail. They shoot it. It ricochets up into what looks like kind of like a control panel.
Yeah, it looked like
underneath.
I just put down like a USB port because that's basically what it looked like.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Smashes the USB port on the front of this alien, and that is what ends his reign.
Yeah,
and in that moment.
Yeah, did you see what happens?
No, what?
The little the two like AA batteries fall out of them.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
The two AA, because I wrote that down because the AA batteries pop out.
That's right.
And that's when all the color returns.
That's right. So you just see like a reverse wave, like all the color floods back into the world, and everybody's fine. And yeah, well, everybody's fine except for General. What was his name? General Warning. Back at the base where so the dragon has now crashed out of the sky, right? And he lands right next to where the general is back on the base. So the general's like the only one back on the base, but this dragon thing is next to it. So then he tells this is when he tells his gathered masses to hit it with everything he's got. So that's when they just blast the shit out of the base. I don't know if we ever hear from him again or not.
I don't think you do.
I don't think you do. I think he's pretty well dead. The only thing that I wrote down from this is the doctor. Like everybody's fine now except that guy, and I think Manservant's probably fine. And the doctor looks at. Yeah, go ahead. What do you got for Manservant?
Let's circle back to Manservant at the very end.
Okay. So I've got the doctor is now checking. The professor's checking on Toluca, and he says, "How do your ankles feel now?" And you cut to her, and she's got these massive bandages wrapped around her ankles, and she's like, "Well, they're broken, but they're better." So
I loved that bit.
I'm glad they came back and actually like followed up on it because it's ridiculous.
I really loved that bit. That was so fucking dumb, but so funny.
It was pretty stupid. And then another thing they come back to is the idea of the film strips. So like Daggett says like, I've got a film that'll explain everything, right?
So this is what I didn't understand. And so they go through and they explain. So Daggett says, I have this film strip that I want everybody to watch. Right. So great. That's the third time that they've called back that bit. You know, it's still funny. They closed it out. I'm proud of them for hitting that.
Good job, guys.
Hitting that beat and then bouncing out. But the thing that is weird is that they show the film strip, but then in like a blink of an eye, it sort of resolves itself. Like they watch the film strip, you do not.
Yeah,
you
as
the audience are not privy to what occurs during this. And so evidently that is supposedly what explains what happened to Manservant?
I think it just explains everything. Everything that's left unexplained. Yeah.
Well, because for some reason it seems like Manservant was not an actual person, that he was like a figment of an imagination.
I don't know, man.
That had happened because he's not with them at the end. And presumably he's been a servant to Oxnard Montalvo for decades.
I'm going to assume that all of them are not real.
Well, then Oxnard makes the comment. He goes, he did all this without using their tongues.
Yeah.
And I went, what?
That's when it cuts to the outro, isn't it? Like the credits roll?
It's when they cut to the part where they're doing the candy bit again as Norbert and Daggett. We're going to just gloss right over that.
Exactly.
So then we get to this point where, as you mentioned, it's the narrator.
Yeah.
And he is just going off.
He's like, they're not paying me enough for this shit.
He is done.
Like, this story makes no sense.
I was.
And then he starts calling things out. He's like, look, it makes no sense. If the alien was powerful enough to just bring these monsters to life, then why did he need Norbert and Daggett to begin with? It just doesn't make any sense. And I read the script. I mean, I skimmed it. I got the script.
I skimmed it on the bus.
I looked at it on the bus. Whatever, I'm not getting paid enough for this. And then he's very upset the entire time. And that kind of made it not okay for me, but I was glad that it was an interesting way to end the show. Because the whole thing was just like complete nonsense. So they ended it with somebody saying like, look, I know how stupid and insane this was. So just wanted to let you know, thanks for watching. Yeah.
I think, and I want to say this, the challenge of admitting absurdity is that the absurdity factor that you have presented dissipates.
Yeah,
like acknowledging how absurd something doesn't make it more absurd. It sort of takes away some of the power and the I guess maybe how upended or it continually casts doubt about how reliable the narrator was in this potential instance. And so like you sit there thinking to yourself like, okay, great, they've clearly broken the fourth wall like a dozen times in the show. And now they're admitting how crazy and how nonsensical this is. I'm not buying into this just because, like, I'm not buying into this more. This B-movie
because the narrator said it was
additionally,
weird too.
Because you know how fucking crazy it is.
Right. See, that's what I loved about Freakazoid back in the day, was that they would do crazy shit. They would have a non sequitur that would cut to something completely different, and then they would never explain any of it. And that I like. And
that's absurd. That's absurd comedy.
Yeah, by definition,
that's how you do it. Absurdity for the sake, of calling it out for being absurd is not absurd.
Right. So anything else from this particular episode? I think that's probably a good spot to end that.
I don't know. frustrated.
You're frustrated. Well, at least we're at the end of the show, so it's a good time to be frustrated. You take a break there, buddy. I'm gonna go through a user review. We're gonna have 2 of them today because they're pretty good. We're gonna have a user review. A lot of people, again, we pull these from IMDb. A lot of people really like this show. Granted, there are only about 30, 35 reviews, but all of them were really positive. Just like this one from Dudus from PA back in 2002. Wouldn't you say Dudus? Or is it Dutus?
It's Dudus.
Dutus?
Dudus.
Dudus. I like Dudus. Dudus says, if you don't like this show, then you are a spoothead. I'm assuming that's an insult from Angry Beavers?
Sure.
I think so. This is the most hysterical Nicktoon up to date. Let's try that again. This is the most hysterical Nicktoon up to date? What?
Question mark?
Question mark? The episodes are hilarious, especially the muscular beaver ones. And the characters are laugh out loud funny. I like Daggett because he's real stupid and says a lot of funny stuff, like Spoothead. Okay, there it is. So now we know where Spoothead comes from. Norbert's funny because of his personality and how he says words in a different kind of way. It just gets me going. It's also funny because they watch B-movies like The Crawling Spleen, which was pretty funny. I recommend this show to anyone who wants a quick laugh. After all, the Angry Beavers rule. So thanks, Dudus. We have another one here that's, I think he one-ups Dudus.
I almost feel like I should read this in the tone of the doofus that I think is probably writing this.
Okay, fair enough.
This is from Shortcake 518. And why did the show stop making more shows? This was the best show ever, and when they stopped making new ones, ellipsis, why?
So many questions.
It was the best one ever. Unfair, the show was tight, and it rocked.
This one's almost better visually because it's such an assault on the senses. The way this thing is written.
I didn't realize tight had 3 G's and 4 T's. And when he questions why, there's 6 question marks.
And a backslash. You missed that last one. You gotta hold down that shift key, brother. All the way through. Oh, Shortcake, you're the best. You and Dudus get together.
You and Dudus.
I love that Shortcake thinks that the way shows are made are by other shows making new shows. It's my favorite part of that review. This is how shows are made since the beginning of time.
Why did this show stop making more shows?
Hey Arnold begat Angry Beavers, and Angry Beavers begat Cat Dog. That's how Nicktoons are made.
Let's just get biblical on.
That's right. How Nicktoons are made, boys and girls. Oh, all right, buddy. So those are a couple reviews from out there in listener land. What do you give Angry Beavers? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Let's keep it simple.
All right, I'm going to go...
You're going to say it. So not even a recommendation for people out there to check it out?
No, I mean, I would... You told me to keep it simple.
Sure.
So I'd say thumbs down for me, but I mean, I think it's worthwhile checking out this episode. I think that there are a lot of things that that can be redeeming in this episode. I'd be curious to go back and watch one of the more traditional episodes and see if I find some of that. So I'm making this judgment call based off of this one episode. I will say that the first time that I watched it, it did kind of put me to sleep at some point.
Yeah.
So I don't know. So I'm gonna go thumbs down, but I would say watch this episode because of the tropes that it plays around with and sort of the comedic sensibility that they introduce, and in some cases do a good job following through. Sure. There are just a lot of throwaway jokes that are in here that seem like they're killing time and are just dead air.
Yeah.
So for that alone, I don't think that I can really I can recommend checking out this episode, but I don't know that I can recommend this series based on this one episode. That being said, the caveat is I should check out a more traditional episode.
Yeah, and I mean it's tough for us to know coming into these because honestly, like I said, we're getting into the transition episodes now and the transition series. So I didn't even remember like a specific one that was a standout. This just happened to be one of the 2 highest rated episodes of all of Angry Beavers, so we decided to go with this one. So if this is the best you got, I don't know, for people out there who want to be Nicktoons completionists and just say that they've seen everything at least once, and I say sure, check it out, but if you're just looking for like a casual watch, you can probably look elsewhere. So I'm going to agree with Sean on this one. So that's it for Angry Beavers, thankfully. Sean, buddy, what do you have going on the next couple of weeks you want to share with listeners out there?
Ooh-wee. Got a bunch of stuff going on. I'm going to be performing a bunch of shows that are going to be in the DC area in Adams Morgan at the DC Arts Center. The times vary, the location does not. And you can find more information out at witdc.org, and we will post all that information and those shows up on the website. Hey, if you're listening and you're in San Diego and you're not doing anything over Valentine's Day weekend, come on and check me out. I'll be performing as a part of the San Diego Improv Festival. It's going to be the late show on Saturday night, so it should be a ton of fun. At this point, I keep saying I won't be your date. Maybe I'll be your date. If you come out, definitely be your date. Definitely give you a high five.
Ooh, lucky listeners.
Buy a drink at the bar. So tons of fun. So yeah, come and see me in San Diego. And then you can always find me on the Twitters and the Instagrams, the Turs and the IGs.
Oh, no, you're doing so good.
At Sean Paul Ellis.
Oh, you're doing so good.
Dave, what are you up to, buddy?
Oh, I'm up to the same old shit. So you can find me over at collider.com, where I review such shows as The Flash, Arrow, and Walking Dead, which should all be coming back fairly soon. By the time you're hearing this, you'll probably be getting ready for the second round of these shows. So you can check me out at collider.com and read our recaps there, along with movie and TV news as well. You can find me on Twitter at DrClawMD. You can also, if you're interested, check out some of my short fiction over at davetrumbore.com. That's a new website that I've just started populating with some short fiction. So if you're interested in that, come on over and check it out and drop me a line. If you're interested in finding out more about Saturday morning cartoons, you can do so by looking at our website, SaturdayMorningCartoons.com. Remember, that's morning with a U. Check us out on Twitter at MorningToons. You can follow us on Facebook. Check us out on YouTube. You can also listen to us each and every week through iTunes and Stitcher. And don't forget about Sean's handiwork over there on our Tumblr page, SaturdayMorningCartoons.tumblr.com. And also feel free to drop us a line. Let us know how we're doing and suggest a show for a future episode. SaturdayMorningCartoons@gmail.com. That's about it for this one. We have one more New Year's Nicktoon in January. Holy crap, it's going to be February soon already. That's a little crazy.
Crazy.
So, are you looking forward to our next and last New Year's Nicktoon?
I don't know. Again, I mentioned this at the beginning of the show. This was a show that I did not love,
no.
And I've definitely watched a couple episodes of it. So I'm going into this with a heavy burden.
Oh boy!
I'm going into this
a heavy burden on this show.
I'm going into this with the hope. I should say heavy hope.
Heavy hope. That's the new. That's Star Wars Episode 8. A heavy hope. Right.
Heavy hope floats. I'm really hoping that this show can change my mind about its opinion, because it's two things that I really like.
True. But
and
not
in
put
this
together.
case, yeah, except I like them when they're separate.
Yes.
And in this case, they are sewn together in the middle.
Yeah, I was always fascinated as a kid/teenager at this point by the biology of it. And then once Human Centipede came along, it answered all the questions that I had ever needed to know.
Thanks a lot, Tom Six.
About Cat Dog. Obviously, Cat Dog. Cat Dog is a spiritual prequel to Human Centipede. So we will be talking about that on next week's Saturday Morning Cartoons. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.